All right, guys, here we are. Episode
113.
No, 123.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay, I was pretty confident there.
We've really come up. And today we've got a repeat guest on. And I'm not going to fuck up his last name. He's back. Nathan Kiely, strength and conditioning coach for multiple teams now. I think it's changed slightly since you've been on last.
Yeah, I think I was here like a year ago. And
You're just wrapping up post-grad.
Just after it, just under a year.
yeah, well, slightly different positions now, moving up in the world.
And where are you now? You've had pretty successful. Your team had a successful year.
Yeah, so at the moment, I'm now performance coach at Cricket New South Wales, where I work most of the year with their academy programs. So male, female, under 15s through to under 19s. And then over the summer, I work with the women's WBBL Sydney Sixers side.
Big Bash League for our American listeners.
Cricket.
Yeah, so Jordan Silk, a few weeks ago, we had him on. He plays for the same team, Sixers, except the men's team.
What is the premier women's sport right now in Australia? Is it women's Big Bash, the AFL, women's NRL, or women's Sevens?
It's
Probably still netball.
Yeah, I actually don't know.
The people who watches netball,
young girls.
other than the people that play it.
Young girls. And even then, I think netball's done AFLW has done a pretty good job of taking a lot of the netball players.
Yeah, they're recruiting really well.
Yeah.
Smart.
Like that Taylor Harris chick that was very controversial.
She's like a boxer.
Yeah, she was a
previously.
boxer. She's had 3 fights. She's a pretty athletic chick. Like, I'm surprised that the UFC wouldn't reach out to someone like that. She was that girl that posted the photo of her bombing.
I honestly wouldn't be shocked if UFC pays less for a lot of their female fighters than what they would get paying for women's AFL or Big Bash or something.
Well, I think the Big Bash
even women that are doing all right are getting like 10 and 10.
Yeah, that is shit.
And then you got to pay your coach.
Women's Big Bash is like, isn't the minimum wage like 40k now for
I have absolutely no idea.
If that is the case, they're getting paid a lot more than low-ranked women's fighters.
The thing with like the women's Big Bash, and I think a lot of these women's sports, is that the competitions are quite short, so the contracts aren't like a 12-month contract. Like if it was expedited out over 12 months, then potentially the money would be pretty good. But I mean, for the WBBL, our players are in camp for 2 months, and the rest of the year they're either playing for the national team or state team, and that's a separate contract as far as I'm aware. So, I mean, our best players, I think they're doing all right for themselves because they're
That's good.
on a Cricket Australia contract plus a Big Bash contract as well. We've got some international players who play for their national teams throughout the year and then come and join us.
Oh, really? What sort of nationalities did you have this year?
So we've got 2 South African girls and a Kiwi.
And did the girls ever sort of get in debates or discuss like how much the Australian guys were getting paid versus the South Africans versus the Kiwis?
I wasn't privy to those conversations. I'm not too sure.
Did you want to mansplain it to them?
No.
Mansplaining is one of my favourite terms.
Sounds heaps derogatory.
It's so good.
Did you guys hear, speaking of like derogatory and sexism, there was a feminist came out in the States and she was saying that men fart too aggressively and it makes women submissive. When men fart heaps aggressively and louder, so they're scared to fart as loud.
I have a client who works in HR and she had to deal with an incident similar to that recently, but there was no precedent, so they didn't really know how to navigate through it. And they were like, look, let it go. If it keeps happening, like let's say in another 6 months' time, this person's farting is still problematic, then we'll try to think of a way we can escalate it.
But were they aggressively
farting? At what
farting?
point do you take it to like, all right, you give someone their notice? Like if you don't stop farting, we'll have to fucking sack you.
Well, it happens at gyms all the time. People smell. It's like, when is someone too smelly to be a member of your gym?
So
like,
again, great example of this. I know of a trainer at a particular gym where management has had 3 conversations.
That's heavy.
With the
That's
person.
3 too many.
And then they, like I said, they don't know where to go with it. But because usually you just have that one conversation, that's hectic in itself.
Yeah.
And that should, with any rational person, fix the issue almost immediately. But yeah, what do you do when you've sat down and said it 3 times? Because then my friend who worked there was like, the manager was like, well, now you have a crack because like, you know, their hands were tied effectively.
When do you tell someone they're smelly, Nath? Who you're training?
You've either got to...
You ever had to have the chat?
Well, you've either got to get in early doors or you've missed your opportunity. Like, you can't let it go for 6 months.
Yeah. Fuck. And then it's
You
too far.
got
Then they'll
to
get
call
offended.
it. You got to call it.
Yeah.
On the eve of the big
The
bash
moment it
fight, I was like,
happens.
you kind of stink.
Yeah, you can't just think. Literally about to walk out. Just
But
be like, do your city proud.
Yeah.
Put on some deodorant.
I mean, the girls are fine. They don't stink. So
Is that
haven't had
It'd be
a
worried
plus
if
of
girls
working with
smell
women
bad.
in sport?
Pardon?
Are women less smelly, and is that a bonus to working
absolutely.
with women?
Yeah, I reckon women would be more adherent to a program and way less smelly than blokes.
Luke Edgell, I know, is all about it. He's like, yeah, just much easier to train generally.
Women,
A bit
female
more
athletes.
emotional, but they just listen better and stuff.
Yeah, he did say that. I actually saw someone rocking an Edge Performance hoodie on my way over here.
Did you just?
Yeah, I didn't know who it was, and I was going to say something and take a photo, but I was like, she was too far away. And it was a female.
We gotta get some of those budgie smugglers off him.
The Edge Performance.
He probably
one.
doesn't want me swimming in Edge Performance togs because he trains some good swimmers, but I'm sure he'd let you have a pair.
Yeah, he should. He
Just
should,
don't
for
play
sure.
golf in them.
Yeah, nah, fuck me, Dad. That was poor performance. It was my best performance, though. Hold on. We didn't let Nath deal with the question, which was how do you deal with smelly athletes? It's a question for the ages.
Yeah, I don't know if it's my role to dictate that sort of... I think that's like team culture, isn't it? Like,
See, I would have thought
captain of the team's got to get in there and lay down the law.
He would defer it back to you, I reckon.
Yeah. Well, because then there's the thing as well where it's different to PT because it's more hectic in PT because they're paying you directly, whereas it's not like they hand you cash at the end of every session, so you can just be like, hey, you stink.
Yeah.
Do something about it.
Well, it
And
depends
they
on the
can't really get
context
mad at
as
you.
well, right? Like if they're having a crack, and I'll tell you what, our gym can be like 45 degrees in the middle of summer.
Oh, yeah, I
So
feel the heat through that
It's
gym.
just you just deal with it, right? Like if they're training hard, but yeah, walking into the gym to start the day already smelly, that's problematic.
I don't know how people do it. Some people do it. But do you think the Australian team wouldn't see as though Ponting is like the poster boy for Rexona?
Well, I'm sure he was probably in an ad at some point, but
I think
maybe
he's
they were
getting
trying to
played
tell
out.
him something. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? It's just one of those things.
Was he just using the aerosol can to tamper with the ball in some way?
Oh, no, not Ponting.
Let's not go there.
Speaking of golf, Ponting is a guy who's an absolute jet at golf. We've spoken about that numerous times on the show. How do you go at golf, Nate? Because you're a good cricketer. You work with cricket. They play a lot of
Debatable.
golf.
And my golfing skills, not great. Not red hot either.
But if I say good
I don't
cricketer, I mean
mind-
better than Angus and I.
Well, yeah.
Not
Yeah.
stiff competition.
I don't know if that's saying a lot, but yeah, my golf game, I probably need a few lessons off Edge as well. So if you guys are planning on having a lesson, I might tag along on that.
That would actually be pretty fun.
We need to move the High Performance Invitational to the
Long
city.
Reef. Long Reef Golf Course.
Yeah, okay.
That's where he is. I'm sure he could get us on there.
I'm
I
down
think
for
he's a
that.
member of Long Reef. Anyway,
I'm a bit of a simpleton when it comes to golf. I'm all about club head speed and just trying to moose it. And the
Trying to
short
whack
game,
the shit out of
short
it?
game's not great, but
see, he said to me, because all my mates are like, you got to ease your way into the shot, because I always try and tonk the shit out of it, and it always ends up slicing or hooking. And I tagged him in one of my drives, and he responded, thanks, he was at a wedding, so I appreciate the time. And he said, just wrap the
must have been a good wedding. Huh?
yeah, replying to High Performance Podcast Instagram stories. He said, just wrap the shit out of the club around the ball. He's like, swing it like a baseball bat as hard as you can. And I was like, oh,
That might
God
be
damn
a
it.
GR.
Have a go, you mug.
Yeah, so I did, and it was pretty much the same. Like, if I shot it easy, it was shit. If I shot it hard, it was
But did
shit.
it go further?
Not really. I tell you what cracks me up about my game. Like, we'd pull up first hole, it'd be like 300 meters, and I'm like, of course I'm going to drive this. And then I literally can only drive it like straight, maybe 130 meters. And then we get to like 170 meter par 3, and I'd be like, oh, better put the driver away. Like I could fucking drive it over the hole straight. So me and my mates pull out our irons, and then we're hitting it like 60 meters, and then still playing 5 shots. And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing?
It's
I
a
was like, we
humbling
should be
game,
driving.
isn't it?
So humbling. Especially down there at Mollymook when you're in a strong, stiff nor'east breeze, I would say. Does nothing for the favour of
And
the
it's
game.
the one game as well where the old boy can maintain the edge very late into his career, and they
Yeah.
get real smug about it.
Oh,
I
mate,
hate
there's
seeing
blokes
old boys
like
at the
in their
course.
50s still playing professionally and just
Oh, yeah.
cleaning up.
One
Yeah.
of my clients put it best as well. He's like, you really got to hate someone who's having a good day of golf when you're having a bad one, because not only are they playing golf well, but you know their life's in order as well.
Yeah,
Because we
apparently-
all saw what
yeah.
happened to Tiger Woods
Yes.
when all the hooker stories came out. He could not put the club to ball effectively.
Definitely.
No, he sort of regathered
I think there's
himself.
a lot of sports out there where stress you can use, whereas I don't think like things like golf, surfing.
It's not productive.
Yeah, maybe even like dancing.
Contact sports, good.
Yes.
It's it's all about that.
The
In
technique
a sport
for
where
it.
someone is trying to stop you from doing what you need to do, I think that's when it plays into it. But when it's just you and the implement or something, I think it's you need to be very zen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in a cricketing context, as a batter, obviously the bowler's trying to stop you from doing what you want to do, but I think it's because it's such a fast reaction, like fine motor skill type
But no one's
activity.
tackling the bowler.
Yeah, generally that isn't part of the game. But
True.
it could be more exciting if it was added.
Tackle cricket.
If they let me tinker with the rules of cricket, we could have a game on our hands. Have
We
you
could
ever
have a
seen
game.
Rollerball?
Yeah,
It was voted the worst
one of
movie
the best movies I've
early
ever seen.
2000s, I believe, or whatever year it came
The
out.
only scene I remember from that is the sex scene where they're in the toilet and she whacks out the cameras. He's in the change room and this chick goes in to fix him up and she's like smashing out cameras and he thinks he's going to get bashed, the main character, and it's this heaps hot chick. I think it's a unisex teams from memories, and then they get it on.
I don't know if unisex is the right word.
Unisex teams. It's co-ed teams.
Yeah,
Anyway,
whatever it is.
Doesn't
I
matter.
know what
Like
you're
mixed
saying.
netball teams.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, they're chicks on like a motorbike.
Yeah, that was a sweet.
Are you familiar with the sport?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an avid fan, but yeah, I know what you're
They
talking
essentially
about.
play it with, it's like basketball played with a shot put, and everyone's on roller skates.
And
But
people
then
are on
someone
motorbikes.
gets to be on a motorbike.
Yeah, I don't know how they green lighted that, but
It worked. It was at a weird time in cinematography
Reeves'
where they
career.
made that movie Stealth, that plane that flew itself and it like took over the world.
I don't know if I've seen that
that
one.
was heavy. It was going to blow up and like crash into some buildings. Anyway, let's get this back to sport. Okay, Nathan, what was the main hurdle you had to overcome as a strength coach this year?
The last 12 months.
Last
I
12
mean, it's been a pretty challenging 12 months, like working in new roles, sort of trying to find your feet with new groups of athletes and establish relationships with the players and get an understanding of like what they want from their S&C. I suppose it's always challenging when you jump into an environment where you're unfamiliar, but I think that's also like a good learning experience. So jumping into female sport where I didn't have a lot of experience, like we already sort of touched on the difference working with female athletes and comparing that to male athletes, and then also the Sixers, for example, we had a 15-year-old athlete and we also had a 34-year-old athlete in the same team. So having to work with a really broad range of athletes in that same context, it's a really new, different challenge. And I mean, the other thing is the exciting end of that is that you've got really high elite level athletes in that context as well. At times, you're sort of just in awe watching those athletes go about their business as well, which is something that I haven't really had a lot of exposure to as well. So that was exciting and new and different. So like the last 12 months has been really interesting for me. I think I've learned and grown a lot as a coach. It was good.
Are you looking forward to being older, just so you don't have to deal with? Like, is it a bit of a hurdle to overcome being younger than some of the athletes you train?
I think I'm probably getting to the point now where most of the athletes I'm coaching are younger than me, but
Nice.
a few years ago it was a bit different.
Is that just because female athletes are generally younger?
Yeah, I think the age, like the average age of the athletes is a little bit younger in that context, but even in the men's game, so I don't even know how old I am now, 27 or something like that. So I'm sort of around the same age as most of those guys, and a lot of the younger ones, the guys and girls coming through, are obviously younger than me. I think, did you guys have Pat Lane on?
Yeah.
I think he was sort of talking about how we were. He's sort of grown up with
like younger
the
than me,
players
isn't
that he's had.
About the same age.
Yeah, and yeah, it's sort of, he's probably I think I remember him sort of discussing that he was at that tipping point now where the athletes were beginning to be younger than him. But I think the other thing as well is if your athletes trust you and they know where you're coming from, it doesn't really matter as much. Obviously, that like appeal to authority, like the older head, obviously helps, but I don't think it necessarily is like the be all and end all as well. So there's a bit of a balance to it. It doesn't hurt to be the older, wiser head that comes across as being experienced, but you got to be able to back it up with the content that you're delivering and the relationships that you build with the people as well. So I don't think it's the be all and end all, your age as a coach, but it does help. Yeah,
it's one of those things where I'd much rather be a young new coach, like going into a position like you're in, than a guy in my 40s going into a new role and like just coming out of university and having another career. I think the players will still look to. It's hard to say who they would look to with more authority in that situation.
Even imagine if you are that age, that old boy, and you've been in the industry your whole life. Like, if you think about the way the industry's developed over that time frame, there's no way you could be a 50-year-old S&C coach who hasn't bought into some bullshit at a certain point.
Yeah, potentially.
Like, I think there's just too much baggage at a certain point. I think that's something that we're lucky coming in almost this second generation of coaches.
Well, then
maybe
I
second
sat
generation.
down with Nick Gill last week, and
How old's he, but
he's
Not
like
a
mid-40s.
dinosaur. Yeah, fair.
And so he's been through some shit, and he started off here in Australia. He'd studied at Lismore. They started doing S&C for the NRL refs, went to a sort of like really fast track to the All Blacks. That was in 99, and then went to a provincial team, then went to like the Crusaders or something, and then the very next year was at the All Blacks. I think that was in 2004, and now he's still with him. And a guy like that's super knowledgeable, written books. But even he was giving shout-outs to Instagram, being like, he never got back to me with the list. I should hit him up for it, of guys he looked up to online. But it was interesting. So I think it's like PT. There are plenty of guys who have seen the shit and they've stuck with it. But then there's those good few that have grown through it.
Yeah, I think like at the end of the day, it's just like anything. There's good practitioners and bad practitioners, and the age and experience can help you be one of those, or make it harder for you to be one of those. But it's not necessarily all that matters. I think one of the main challenges with being a young coach is it is authority. But if you as crap as it can sound, like if you look the part, if you clearly know what you're talking about and you're able to actually impart wisdom onto the athletes that you're coaching, and the athletes can see that you know what you're talking about, and you automatically get at least some degree of buy-in right there, right?
Yeah. That was very interesting. I was thinking up on the way over here. I was like, fuck, I haven't thought about anything to talk about. And I was like, second time guest. I was like, don't write any questions
it would be
down.
sweet.
That's why you get the invite back. The conversation just figures itself out.
It's flowing.
I've got something. This is the one thing. I actually only thought of this as I entered the grounds of the SCG, but I would have been really disappointed if I forgot to bring it up. Let's talk about Michael Boyle, because
Yes.
so I was
Who's
aware-
Michael Boyle?
legendary old boy S&C coach.
Does he have Instagram? Can you pull him up?
Yeah, has a facility in the States.
Well, then go on.
Just churns out like 1,000 youth athletes every year. You also have a... okay.
As usual, I do
He's
everything.
He's a really experienced private
S&C.
sector S&C.
Okay, so sort of like...
His Instagram is such an old man's Instagram, though. And I do love that part of it.
oh, fuck.
Like the selfie videos and stuff like that are brilliant.
Fuck, he's almost as old as Dad.
He's been around and seen it all, and I think...
And our
he's-
Dad's in way better shape. Than this bloke. Way better. He looks fucking
So what was the
weathered.
video? Because I started following him when you reposted a video, and the video resonated with me. I'm just trying to pick what it was about, though.
what was it about? It's a good
Was it about
question.
power cleans or something?
It might have been. No, I'm not sure.
Because I've got to touch on that as well.
I know this is high quality podcasting with a pause. while
Sorry,
we
people are
look through our
taking
Instagram
shits while they
feeds.
listen to this. They don't have anything much better to do, trust me.
There you go. Angus, you had your
Or
boy
love.
Travis Mash on speaking.
No, they debated.
Yeah,
which
so
we
they
will
had
get
a
to
really
that.
interesting debate about.
Which made me nervous because Travis Mash, I just wish that they picked someone who wasn't from as much of a powerlifting, weightlifting background, because I feel like he dragged a lot of natural bias in there.
They had a really interesting debate just on Twitter talking about. So I suppose the whole thing with Mike Boyle is he's not a big proponent of like traditional bilateral squatting. So he's a massive advocate of like what he will call single leg squatting, but I think a Bulgarian
I've heard of this
squat
guy.
is not single leg. Nonetheless, that a really interesting debate.
Wait,
where
say
they
that
said-
again. I was just-
Squats are the only truly single leg one, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, anyone who is you do like split squats. So let's say you have your right leg in front first.
Well, a split squat's a split squat. It's not a single leg squat.
Yeah, exactly. But even single leg, like reverse lunges, whatever leg you do first, when you go to the next leg, it's a lot harder because that leg's already fatigued.
well,
I
that's
feel
a-
like.
Look,
issue
much
with
like
single leg
gender
training
is
as well.
perceived as a spectrum these days, I would say the same thing about bilateral and unilateral exercises.
That's true.
No one being truly one versus the other, but existing on a continuum.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, go on.
So
Well,
the quote was that he finds bilateral squatting pretty stupid these days, or pretty dumb these days.
Yeah, I suppose I can see where he comes from, and with the population that we work with in cricket, with like fast bowlers, for example, who have really high incidence of lower back injuries, that's sort of our major time loss injury. That's the one we really worry about. He makes some really good points around is axial loading of the spine really important for our athletes, or should we be avoiding it?
But is
especially-
axial loading and bilateral squatting mutually inclusive?
Well, I mean, the other way you could argue is that bilateral squatting and axial loading actually builds tolerance to load, and therefore it could be beneficial. The reality is, I don't think there's enough conclusive evidence either way, and therefore a safe bet is to probably do a bit of bilateral squatting and a bit of single leg squatting where you are not axially loading and you're covering both bases. And I think that sort of just comes back to one of the major problems with debates in fitness and S&C and
there's
health
not enough study
and nutrition. It's not even that. It's more just that people want to pick a side. And the reality is, most of the time, the truth lies in the grey area in the middle, and you should probably be doing a bit of both at each end of the spectrum. And instead of sort of picking your team and only going one way with it, I think that's a major problem, that people get really caught in that trap.
Yeah.
Well, then there's the overarching thing of, does Mike Boyle even believe what he said?
Well, I think,
or is he just a content farmer now? And he's like, oh shit, I got to put something up today.
To an extent, I think he's really picked and dug his heels in with his no bilateral back squatting or front squatting or whatever, or heavy squatting. And in order to get his message across, he just keeps hammering that home. And I think to an extent, if you went and watched him train some specific athletes, they probably are squatting in their program.
Well, and the thing that I find interesting about it is there are sports that you play with both your feet in a line. Most of them you do. It is. I would say most sports are unilaterally focused, but like wrestling, if you're coming out. There's also a lot of single leg
The other
stuff.
thing is, like, your strength training is only ever general prep anyway. So getting caught up in the specificity of your lower body heavy, slow moving push movement is probably not a game worth getting caught into. Like, I just think if the goal is to develop like muscle cross-sectional area and force, your ability to produce force, just use whatever means you're going to get that goal, instead of getting caught up in, well, are you separating your hips and what sort of alignment have you got? I think like you're just getting caught up on little X's and O's, and I don't necessarily think that's where the really important stuff happens. But people argue to the high hills about it because I think they think it makes them sound smart.
The question I have for everyone is, if you could only choose one, which would it be?
I think I would lean towards the single leg.
Me too. Like, it's so hard though because you just can't have the same load.
Yeah.
Oh, some people are really strong. I'm very weak single leg.
So and this is one of the interesting aspects of Boyle's argument, because he talks about the bilateral deficit, which is, he was saying that if you do a lot of just bilateral squats, you end up being able to lift less than 50% of the load on each leg. But that research that he was quoting, I believe, was from untrained populations. I know Greg Knuckles got in touch with Travis Mash prior to the debate and showed him some research that said there was a bilateral surplus from trained populations, right?
The thing that just doesn't make sense to me with the bilateral deficit is they're comparing bilateral back squat with like a rear foot elevated split squat, which we've already discussed is not a single leg exercise. Yeah. So it's still bilateral. It's just that it's asymmetrical. Like
your chair
you're tailing
is under that TV.
Oh, whoops! I was like, "What's that?"
You should rotate it out before you pull.
Am I out?
You're out.
Okay, sweet.
Watch that. We saw that get installed.
Is it all good?
It's all G.
Definitely, you're going to end up under it again.
Is it out on an angle though?
It's meant to be like that.
Okay, good.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Can you get the back end of that chair?
Well, Angus, I got to be. Hold on, you guys keep talking. I'm going to figure out some camera angles for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of just the whole argument loses all validity from the get-go when the way you're testing it is not like a valid way to test what you think you're testing. So
yes,
I think that's one of the ways. It's one of the other issues with sports science is a lot of the times people will say that they're testing something when the test that they're using isn't actually valid for what they say it is. It's testing something other. It's not actually specific to what they're talking about. So if you want to talk about bilateral deficit, all right, well, yeah, what's your 1RM pistol squat? Is that more than 50% of your back squat? I highly doubt it.
Yeah, that would be ruthless trying to test that.
Yeah.
Does a shrimp squat count as a single leg squat?
A what squat?
Shrimp squat. I love these.
What's that? Pull it up. Where's your phone? Oh, you can demonstrate because we're back on YouTube.
Have it back and then you squat like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Regression.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like doing those to warm up sometimes.
Yeah,
holding
that's what I was going
TRX.
to say. Almost, it's more sort of like a primer for me. A warm-up type exercise, I suppose.
Yeah, nice. Love the use of the word primer. Another thing I want to talk about, I promise we'll move away from Mike Boyle soon. I've just had this building up in
Have
me
you
for a
just
while.
found his Instagram?
And the boys at work aren't following the debate, so they just don't want to participate in it with me. But just the concept of good weightlifters, great athletes. Sounds like a great thing to say, but
Well, hey, hold on, weightlifters or like powerlifters, like squat bench
basically
dead?
saying it doesn't matter what your form's like in the gym, generally speaking, as long as you're doing good on the field.
Well, I mean, I agree with that to an extent.
But
like,
not when you're omitting back squats because you think they create injury. Because it's like, then we have a coaching issue. So maybe then if you had better weightlifters, you would have better athletes who aren't blowing out their backs.
Well, yeah, if you look at Mike Boyle talking about good weightlifters, like I'm not even sure
The cleans.
his guys are good weightlifters. Have you seen the way that those guys clean? He put up this thing the other day. He was like,
I'm in mixed
we
minds
always get a lot of criticism about the technique with which our athletes clean. I don't really understand. And I just like the first response was, you'd think if you were getting a lot of criticism all the time, you might reconsider the way you're coaching it. But
No,
alas,
they're just haters.
alas, that
They're
hasn't
just
happened.
jealous.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to bash Mike Ball because I think he also has a lot of really great ideas. And ultimately, I think a lot of these really experienced coaches, for the most part, it's more the principles that they sort of impart on people and the wisdom, and they provoke thought, which is really important. I think when something provokes thought, you automatically are reconsidering the way you do things, which maybe he's not doing with his cleans. But
seeing an 8-year-old kid hip smash and have the bar swing out around him was
I don't
definitely
know
very
what's
thought-provoking.
like the pre-swingy thing.
Because that's what I mean as well.
Oh, is that the bang and the bar
And
into the hip
I
warm-up?
understand his issue with, like, it's hard to get an 8-year-old kid to give enough of a shit to actually, like, sort out their form. I totally appreciate that.
Maybe you
I
shouldn't
just
be
think a
doing
lot
power
of
cleans with
people-
8-year-olds.
Trap bar jump. Like, or like, you know... yeah.
Jump with the med ball. Or just jump as an 8-year-old kid. You probably don't need to be doing that sort of stuff just
100%.
yet.
Yeah, anyway.
Like if you can get the kid to buy in and be like, this skill will
Look,
benefit
I
you
don't
in
think
8
he's
years'
got a lot of
time.
8-year-olds doing power cleans and stuff.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
he's got 13-year-olds doing some funny looking power cleans, and I kind of go, I'm not sold on
For something...
the path you're going down here.
Yeah, because I'd be curious to hear his take on how a power clean carries over to anything anyway.
Well,
And then
Angus
if you're doing a
fucking
bad
reach
job of
out
it-
to him
Yeah,
and
but
get
then
him
it's
on the
weird to
show.
get someone on the show and just argue with them the whole time. Like, you want to get someone on the show and be mates. I'm
Yeah,
not
but
that
I think
confident
when
yet.
we get people on the show, saying that no guests we've had on the show you've had run-ins with before.
No, it's a clean slate so far.
Oh, you and John Evans had a bit of back and forth regarding a...
Was he the one who originally inboxed me about the close grip power snatch?
I think so.
And I, like an idiot, uploaded a video of me doing a close grip full snatch.
I think so.
Yeah.
He brought him back down to earth. Saying that, who's someone, Nathan, you've either had a run-in with online, because I don't think you're much into like calling people out and arguing people as much as Angus is or was, or something you've seen online and it has changed your opinion on a matter? Doesn't have to be strength and conditioning related.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone sort of comes around a few years later and they look back on things that they previously had a certain opinion on. I don't know if I've necessarily gone to heads with someone in an online slagging match and then entirely changed my perspective. Actually, last time I think we touched on functional patterns guy.
Yeah,
we
he's
did.
crazy.
Yeah.
I saw someone clap back to your comment talking about how people used to wear giant suits of armor.
What was that?
It was something to do with the sport debate you were having, and the guy's point was, yeah, but what about knights wearing armor back in the day? And I was just like,
I'm not sure I even saw that comment. I'm glad I didn't. That
You'll
might
find
have hurt my brain. But look, to be honest, I'm not a fan of his stuff, but actually every now and then he'll post something and I'm kind of like, oh, I actually don't mind that exercise. I think I could actually use that. But I don't want to admit it openly. Now that I just have,
Is his name Functional Patterns?
that's what his mum and dad called him. Yeah, nah, Naudi Aguilera or something. Yeah, I
Is
don't
he
know.
from Melbourne?
No, he's a Yank,
Okay.
which explains a lot. Yeah.
It is funny. Like I don't know whether it's because of what I see on Instagram or because we've dealt with a lot of people from America and obviously Australia. I don't see many strength and conditioning coaches beside Irish come from many other countries. It's like Australia, America, Ireland.
Well, I think America's got a really strong strength and conditioning culture. I think a lot of that's driven by the college systems and football.
Yeah,
in
a few more
particular.
jobs as well.
Yeah, well,
and
there's
I
a
feel
lot
like
more. There's a lot more
Germany-
jobs. A lot more jobs.
Germany would have a pretty strong field, but then obviously the language barrier.
Yeah,
might
I don't
be a
know.
thing.
I think in the European scene, a lot of it is driven by football, and football culture around S&C is that it doesn't exist because they're allergic to barbells. So
Yeah.
I suppose that's a bit of a hurdle in terms of getting strength and there's a lot of fitness coaches. A lot of them are,
and they're so shit.
Which is weird for a sport where it's very expensive to have people on the sideline.
They've got a really good understanding of exercise physiology and the like energy system demands of different sports. And I think this is like one of the great things about being open-minded to different perspectives is you can sort of slag off their strength training knowledge of like European football coaches, but the flip side of that is that maybe there's something you can learn about energy system development and the physiology of the sport and the demands. And then the Americans are probably not great with like sports science technology and monitoring and things like this, but what they are really good at is that strength training culture, and they have a really solid fundamental understanding of how to get people big, strong and powerful. And you combine those aspects together, and when you're working in a team sport where you've got to address all of those, then you end up in a really good place where you actually can build a really well-rounded, holistic program.
Well, isn't that where the GPS tracking originally started in soccer?
No, I think it came from AFL. It's an Aussie thing, mate.
Oh,
I think
wow.
I believe it was started by Graham Morris.
Yeah, no, he actually did invent that.
He started the data collection.
He actually invented strength and conditioning. No. It's an AFL thing. So actually, generally, on like the international scale, sports scientists from Australia have probably the best sort of reputation for their understanding of monitoring and like wellness and things like that. And a lot of that stems from being ahead of the curve with GPS monitoring, and a lot of that has come from AFL. Obviously, the running demands of AFL are enormous, and being able to get a really good understanding of what the athletes are doing is what really drove the GPS sort of revolution. Sort of coming full circle now, where I think people have really gone down the rabbit hole of GPS, and they're starting to understand that it's actually quite simple. There's only a few metrics that really matter, and which metrics they are is still a little bit debatable, and I'm not an expert on it myself, but I think it's probably a little less sort of like programs are probably not being driven by that data as much anymore, as that data now sort of supports decision making rather than making decisions for people.
The biggest benefit I could see from that is if a player had a really good season, you might want to see, are they consistent with their top speed throughout the game? Are they consistently putting in the same amount of kilometres? Obviously, it varies with AFL because the pitch size varies from ground to ground.
Yeah, I mean, there's not massive differences, but the top speed is a really important one.
Even like assessing players back from injury, like on the training pitch, can they hit the same speed that they're hitting in
This is what it definitely does get used for, and that's where the application is really strong. For myself, with my limited use of GPS, the way we've used it has been, we'll have a look at a training session, for example, and we have a look at the athlete's top speed and their time spent in different velocity bands, so the amount of distance that they run above a certain velocity threshold. So we call that like high-speed running volume. So if their top speed is within sort of like 10% of the best that they've ever done, we'd say, well, they've been exposed to top speed, which is really important for injury risk mitigation and also from a training dose perspective. So if they're not hitting that, if they're not getting within that, then maybe they need some high-speed running top-up. So we might get them to do a few sprints as a result of the GPS data. And then that high-speed running volume, one of the things we know from from looking at the research is that when it's not necessarily the amount of training that you do that can lead to overtraining and injuries, it's more big changes in the amount of training you're doing. So if we have a look at like a high-speed running volume, if there's a huge spike in that acutely, like if this week we've done 80% more high-speed running than what that athlete is used to, we're probably going to have a think about, are we giving them the right dose? Are we exposing them to a higher risk here by having a big spike in that type of training? But that's where the really strong applications of that technology are at the moment.
Do you find it to be a trainable and elastic quality, someone's ability to handle a lot of increased mileage above that 90% threshold? Or is it something where you mainly monitor it to make sure you're not going over a certain amount and it's an injury prevention thing?
Well, I mean, performance and injury prevention oftentimes go hand in hand. So it's about getting the right amount of something at the right time and picking the right mode. So, if you want to develop someone's sprint ability, you need to expose them to enough of a dose for them to get development. And then the flip side of that is you don't want to overdo it and put them at a higher risk of injury and fatigue. So it's finding that sweet spot in between.
Yeah.
And it's weird because some people can just handle top speed again and again and again. And some people
normally
get
slow
exposed to it.
people.
Yes, exactly. Correct.
You see a lot of people, like Mike Israel loves giving volume prescriptions for maintenance and then for like
Yeah, well, I've always found that interesting.
But then, like, look, I don't know how accurate that is. And in theory, much like
Yeah.
calorie counting, you can just start at a point and then increase it or decrease it based
It
on
seems
the
too
response.
generic what he puts out. I think it's sort of like, surely it's got to be individualized. Like, what's your training
Cool.
history? What sort of volumes have you been exposed to in the past?
So I'm guessing your answer to this question will be vague because I was going to say, when you're trying to maintain top speed, is there a certain amount of meters above 90% you would look for? Or would you just take get a starting point and then go up or down based on the response?
That's probably it's a tricky question. It depends. So as long as you are exposing your athletes to high speed running frequently, and frequently normally means sort of 2 to 3 times per week, as in a single exposure above that, in a team sport setting, that's generally enough. For a track sprinter, they've got a completely different training history, and the training volumes that they've been exposed to in the past are very different, and therefore for them to develop their sprint performance, they're going to need to be doing lots and lots of exposures. They're probably going to need to be doing each week maybe 20 or 30 exposures of 90% plus of their top speed, and they're going to need to be doing it for probably, 1,500, 2,000 meters, whereas for our athletes in a week it could be 250 meters total.
Oh, so that's quite a difference.
Well, and from a developmental perspective, some would argue that you need more than 250 meters. I know, like, take Rog, for example, his program has quite a lot more volume in it than that.
Yeah, a lot more.
To an extent, that might be a higher risk, higher reward type program, where
For that high yield play.
Yeah,
Respect,
and-
Rog. I love it.
and if those volumes give you the results that you're after and you get away with it, and someone doesn't twinge something, then that's a massive win, and that gives you a big edge. And then the flip side of that is if someone hurts themselves, maybe you go, all right, well, maybe we needed a much lower volume, but that much lower volume is potentially not a dense enough dose for that athlete to get that development. So ultimately, it's that playoff between performance and injury risk mitigation, and it's
like
a
how
tricky
much
one.
extra speed is going to, I suppose, in the cricket game, like to get under a ball, to get to the wicket before the ball gets thrown back, it does mean a lot. But
Yeah,
then
well, I mean,
if it's keeping people off the pitch,
The research project that I did last year, one of our key findings was that sprint performance is related to ball speed in fast bowlers. So the faster that the athlete can sprint, the faster they can bowl. And
that's
we know
why
that,
Mitch Stark's so good.
Yeah, and we know that ball speed is really important for performance. If you can bowl fast, you reduce like the decision-making time, and the batter is forced to sort of just rely on reflexes and can't really think about what they're doing. So whether or not training for sprint performance necessarily makes you bowl faster, that's another question. But we know that those athletes who bowl fast generally are faster sprinters.
What's your question?
I got something
I'm
to
gonna
tag on.
change
And it would. The other thing would be even just watching someone run in faster would surely make the batsman sweat a bit more, being like,
Throw
fuck,
off
he's
your
coming
depth
really quick. Yeah.
perception or something.
Yeah. No, even just like,
Fast, slow,
they've
slow.
got pace, and then you're like, oh, man.
If you want to talk about it technically, the bowling run-up has a huge contribution to the ball speed that you produce, right? So you use your run-up to gain momentum, and then you want to transfer that momentum into the ball by creating a really large, abrupt ground reaction force and a big impulse that you can put into the ball. So having a high run-up speed and retaining that run-up speed all the way through to front foot contact, and then putting the brakes on really hard, and all that momentum just whips straight through your body into the ball. So if you can run up faster, generally speaking, you're going to bowl faster. But it's a highly technical coordinative skill. So if you're running up as fast as you can, you might not be able to get in the right positions to bowl properly. So there's that playoff where you might start bowling all over the shop and you lose your accuracy because you're running in too fast. So again, it just sort of comes back to a case of it depends, and you need to kind of find the sweet spot in the middle, right?
I feel like John Evans would have such a hard on discussing bowlers' penultimate steps. With
Fuck, don't talk. Because I go back and forth with him. Like, I changed my stride length of my penultimate step to longer, and I started to get knee pain, but not like jumper's knee pain. It was sort of a bit more medial through there. So then we switched stance from left to right, same thing. But what I think it was is I was running in too fast to the penultimate step because
you need to maintain your rhythm and timing.
Exactly right. So I think I'm jump higher when I feel like I'm not jumping hard, and I feel like it just flows, and it's weird, like where you grab on the ring and how much you try.
Yeah, it's going to depend on like what sort of movement signature you've got. Like what
exactly.
I can't really think of how you would word it, but so for instance, in a fast bowling setting, some bowlers will bowl with what's called a front-on action. So their chest, their trunk stays relatively front on to the bowler at all times when they're bowling. And we know that front-on bowlers have higher run-up speeds because they don't have to reorientate their shoulders and hips in the bowling action. And we've got side-on bowlers who'll sort of turn away from the batter and just point one shoulder at them, just in their load-up. And because you have to do that, naturally you can't run in as fast.
So it's like 1 foot versus 2 foot jumpers. 2 foot's more slow.
It's an interplay between
building.
what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like anything, and I think people forget oftentimes that everything comes at a cost, right? Like if you want to run in faster, there's going to be a cost somewhere else in terms of your technique or breakdown. Yeah. So there's like the moral of the story is there's no free passes. Like for everything, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So
very true.
Yeah, and that's going to be the same in your jumping. Like if you might get, for instance, there might be one aspect of your technique that you are really bought into trying to develop. That's going to change something else in your technique as well, and that could flip the balance negatively as well.
Yeah,
so it's finding that balance that's a really tricky part, and
it's
oftentimes
interesting.
No one's got the exact answer.
Well, that's the thing, no one does, and there's nothing to really test it if you get a new athlete through what's going to work best for them. And I think maybe years and years away there will be something to do. So we're getting Joel Smith, the guy who hosts Just Fly Sport, on the show. Angus, not this Monday, coming the following Monday at 9:30, so
Sweet.
put that in your diary.
Be there.
And he's going to be a wealth of knowledge for this because he's had essentially the greatest minds regarding this field sprint and jumps and force production. So I'm really want to prepare for that because he's a smart guy and he's probably taken so much from these guys and developed something quite smart for himself.
So we've kind of been dancing around this topic the whole time. As far as like sprinting gates, the force production plates, bar velocity measuring tools and things like that, let's have a discussion about technology and training and maybe some of the things you have found helpful, some of the things you've maybe found more of a hindrance. Because I think other S&C coaches always get horny about gear and stuff like that. You have access to a lot of these resources that other people might be interested in, and maybe for that guy looking to make that next purchase to help his team or something.
AirPods. Really like those.
No, I've been really lucky, both at cricket where we've got access to velocity based training, GPS at Newington College where I work with the rugby program there. Same story, different provider for the technology that we use there. But again, timing gates, all that sort of stuff. So I've been lucky that I've been able to play around with it, and at times I've just limited myself to playing around with it. And I think you really need to play around with it first in yourself, in your own training before you start rolling it out with your athletes. I think a lot of people, they get new tech and they start using it straight away, and oftentimes they don't understand the application to the goals, to what they're trying to achieve. And the other thing is people will jump on technology without getting the first 90%, the basics down in place first. You're not going to, as far as I'm concerned, you shouldn't be adding a bar tracking device to your back squat until your athlete can do a half decent looking back squat. You don't develop with a little bit of load on the bar
with shit form.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing. Like I've seen examples of people putting like push bands on bench presses, and the athlete is doing a half rep bench press with 30 kilos on the bar, and they're like a 45 kilo 13-year-old kid. It's like I don't know if you're collecting the low hanging fruit yet. I think you've passed go and collected $200 and the first roll of the dice hasn't even happened yet. So
he's letting all that low hanging fruit rot.
Well, let's say the same for me. Like if I try to come out of a back squat under like let's say 70% plus load as quick as I can, I'm gonna go into lumbar extension and the form's not gonna be ideal. If I try to come up in a smooth manner, I'll often be able to keep my shit together.
Well, like to be honest, like I use GymAware on my own training almost all the time now, and I think it gives a lot of really interesting information. But again, it's the application. Am I trying to drive intent on every single rep? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes I just put it on, and during my warm-up sets, I have a look at the speed, and sometimes that can be a good indicator of fatigue. So if I throw GymAware on when I'm doing my warm-up sets for a bench press, and my bar speed is down, it's probably not a let's have a crack today day. It's probably a let's tick the box day.
But then, you move 80% quicker than ever before.
Yeah,
Maybe you're
because
off for a
there's
testing day.
the research shows that there's a really good relationship between bar speed and your 1RM. So if I walk in and I'm PBing my bar speed with 60 kilos, it's maybe, let's have a crack today and see what we can do. So that's where the technology can be useful. I think oftentimes the best thing you should do is just collect a heap of data first with your technology before you try and make an application.
Yeah.
So, for example, we got GPS at Newington College with our rugby program, and for the first probably 3 or 4 months, all we did was stick the units on the kids and said, run around.
Just run around, be yourselves.
We just wanted to have an idea of what it gave us in terms of numbers. We were trying to learn how to use it ourselves. And it was more towards the back end of the season that we start to go, all right, now we can sort of see some trends here. We're starting to understand what variables are important. That's when we start, looking at top speed. Let's give the kids some feedback on their top speeds and how do we use it to drive competition. And a lot of this technology, for the most part, is really good for driving competition, which is an awesome way to increase the intensity in your training. So that's probably the biggest application for it that I've seen in like junior settings. When you get into senior settings, you can get a little bit more advanced and trickier with it. For example, the units that we've got at Cricket, Cricket Australia lended us a few units for the Cricket Australia contracted players with us in the Big Bash. And those units are quite advanced and they give you lots of interesting outputs. So, for example, we can measure the intensity with which they bowl, their run-up speed, and we've already spoken about the importance of run-up speed, so maybe I can feed that information back to athletes who have an understanding of what this data means, and that might be able to help them with their rhythm, for example. So if a bowler felt that they bowled really well that day, have a look at their run-up speeds from the day. Maybe they're putting 2 and 2 together there and going, oh, maybe I need to run up a little harder, or maybe I've overdone it and I've lost my rhythm. That's probably, but the problem is, right, a lot of people will try and jump to that step straight away. Like that, you save that for the 28-year-old athlete with 15-year training history who has been educated throughout the process around the application of the technology. You don't slap it straight on the 15-year-old athlete in their first season and start giving that information. Like, that's paralysis by analysis. Just get the basics right first. I think that's the key message with technology in strength and conditioning.
Clip. That's the profound clip.
It's just nail the basics, right? Like the boring stuff works, and there's no better example than athletes who just keep doing the same lifts. Weightlifters are the perfect example, right? What do? You clean and jerk, you snatch, you do heavy pulls, you squat, and you do it 4 or 5 days a week. And you do it for 10 years.
Arms 5 days a week on top of that, because I'm dedicated.
Yeah, what you do is you lift heavy 4 or 5 times a week for 10 years. You'll be big and strong. The 10 years is the important part.
Correct.
Everyone thinks it's 10 weeks. But
Fucking damn. Even if you're on gear.
Because that's what I say to people. Some people are like, you're strong. I'm like, am I strong for someone who's trained for 10 years? Fuck off.
Strong by comparison.
Yeah, it's all relative.
Yeah, exactly right. So I want to get into, because we got to get Nathan out of here, and I've got to get back to work as well. We've got 15 minutes still.
Fuck, boys, he's booking too many sessions. I haven't got anything until 5 p.m. Let's chill.
Yeah. Anyway.
25 sessions a week, no worries.
What have you liked in sport recently? I know, right? Shout out to Rowan Browning running that 10.
yeah, that was nice.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it was crazy. Well, that guy, I can't pronounce his name.
Did he come second in that race?
Sorry?
Did he come second in that race?
It was tie first. I think the Japanese guy won. But that Japanese guy, I think he's run sub 10.
Oh, really?
I think, yeah. He's class. Like, he's really, really good.
Oh, nice.
Japanese sprinters, there's a few good sprinters. Like, they always do well in the relay. Like, won a few Olympic and world medals. Yeah, very consistent. So it was good that guy was there. But yeah, Rowan Browning, that was performance of the month for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I've got performance of the month.
Do you get
really?
Any motorsports?
Kind of get around it a little bit. Like, I couldn't tell you who's who and what's happening, but I don't mind.
Sure, you know some F1
Bro, you
guys.
gotta watch Drive to Survive.
Yeah, I saw the trailer.
Angus has been all about it.
It's the best.
Yeah, all right, we'll get around
Best
it.
sport.
Actually, you know what I did watch on Netflix lately? Have you guys seen Ice Guardians?
No.
Oh, it is
I've
hectic.
been told to watch that.
Is
that
hectic.
about like America v Russia?
No. It's about enforcers in the NHL.
That would be hectic.
It's just about like this whole issue with Like, because in hockey, man, they like keep stats on how many fights you've won.
Oh, I've got the most hectic story about that. So there's a Canadian second league, and there's this French team in it, and there's this guy who's an enforcer, and he has had like 368 fights, but he's had like multiple concussions. And the whole documentary just says Vice Sports, Canadian French Hockey League fighting or something.
Yep.
And it's sort of what you're saying, but it's this guy, and he's almost got the record for this competition. Everyone knows him because he's going to throw hands, and people try and take him out. He's been knocked out, let's say 15 times, and the doctor sends him back, sits him down. He's just been concussed. He's one fight off having the record, and the record's still for like X years. I watched this a few years ago, so I'm probably fucking it up a bit, but the basis of the story is
and
that.
Unfortunately,
Anyway,
like, there's no positive adaptation.
no,
You
hold
get
on.
After multiple
So the
concussions.
doctor sits him down. He's like, mate, he's like, don't even play, let alone get in a fight. If you get knocked out one more time, you might die. Anyway, so he's thinking about he's tossing up with his family because he earns pretty good money. And the last scene is him pulling on the gear and skating out to the ice. And then I googled it. He got the record.
Locker style finish.
It's so hectic. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
shout out to those guys. They love throwing hands.
Yeah, I mean, this documentary is cool, man. The Ice Guardians one.
Gonna watch that
Ice
for sure.
Guardians, get around it. They talk about like the superstar skill players, like all the best players.
Everyone's
they all
toweling
had
up Crosby.
Well, no, yeah, like Wayne Gretzky, he's got his enforcer who looked after him. So what
Yes,
what
they
happens,
are.
right, is like if you've got a good enforcer on your team, no one messes with the star player.
Yes,
the star player
yeah,
gets time on the
the
puck,
puck.
and therefore they can like
Oh, that's
execute
like
their skills.
The Dallas Stars. So my boy Segyan, he's one of the class players. Then they had this Russian Ruzvedal or something was their enforcer, and he gets a lot of time on the puck for a pretty shit team. The Stars, like, they're okay, but the Washington, who won last year's Stanley Cup, I think it was, have a hectic Russian enforcer, and he has like no front teeth, and he's never bothered to put them
mate,
back
you don't
in.
play hockey if you've got teeth.
Yeah, they're just like no front teeth. Hockey's such a good sport. Like, I've really been
wild.
enjoying the NBA this season, but when I first went to the stage and watched the Rangers play, I wasn't as into it. But last time I went back, I was fucking all about it. And I've followed a few players, and it's just one of those things you don't have time to watch the games, but it's a fucking awesome sport.
What do you do as an S&C coach of the ice hockey team? I feel like you just want to be a mid specialist.
Strap ankles.
Like, Gray Morris would go all right.
Graham would be awesome in ice
You know
hockey.
who's massive?
Show him a teep kick with
You know-
some ice skates on.
You know who's massive on like ice hockey S&C is Mike Boyle. That's his whole. That's
Oh,
his
really?
jam. Yeah, his whole
Oh,
thing
really?
is
For
ice
some
hockey.
reason, I thought you were going to be like Woodford. Christian
No.
Woodford or something. He
Oh,
seems like the
I
kind
got
of guy
a
who
funny,
can-
you got Woody-
funny story about
No, you need
that
to get
bloke.
Woody on the show.
So my mate Harley sells ad spots for SEN Radio, Croc Media down there, and he said he got called out. He didn't even know. He's like, we went down the coast. This is one of my best mates. He's like, do you know this bloke Christian Woodford? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, he's the most fucking intense bloke I've ever spoken to.
He's very passionate.
And I was like, yeah, dude, I fucking see him talking stuff online. We were meant to have him on the show
Get him-
once, but
I'll get him on
something
for you.
I
happened.
listened to just this week
get
his
him on your
episode
phone.
on Joe DeFranco, and like he asked him a question at the start of the show. 2 hours in, he had not finished answering it.
Fuck, mate. I just don't think.
Him and us could be a wild combo.
I think one of us shouldn't be here. It should just be because then there's less people to talk.
No, I feel like we just need to go into it knowing to shut up and just let him have the floor.
But then he might as well. I think he has his own podcast. Just listen to that. There's got to be some chime in from you and I, calming him down.
Yeah. No, I'm keen to get him on. Have a
Yeah.
yak.
Anything else sport related? And then we got a new scripted question we can ask
Oh,
you.
in terms of highlights lately?
Yeah. What you've been about?
Let's get in
We
your
start
fire.
talking about
the
sport.
highlight of the summer for me was definitely like the Sydney Sixers girls and
Yeah,
the
made the
season
final.
they had. Yeah, I don't know if you guys watched the semi-final day. That was a
No.
Did you
really
post that
intense
highlight?
day. Potentially. It was pretty crazy day. There's two games at the same ground. Both of them last ball thrillers, and both of them. It was just a really good advertisement for like women's sport, but. I think the thing that was really intense is as the ball was coming off the bat on the last ball of each game, I think everyone at the ground would have thought the team that ended up losing was about to win.
Hectic.
So,
It was a
for
good game.
example, the first semi-final, the ball is literally going for 6 and this girl just sticks a mid out and takes an absolute screamer on the boundary.
That was the one I saw, yeah.
Yeah, and then the second game that we were involved in, off the bat, we thought that one of their players had hit the winning runs and it was going to roll away for 4, and one of our girls full stretch, dive, save, bats it into one of the other girls who puts a beautiful throw in over the stumps. But the wicket keeper, Alyssa Healy, takes the ball over the stumps, but the girl at her end running has made her ground already, so she turns around, pings it at the other end, and hits the middle stump out of the ground.
Fuck, Alyssa
Other
Healy,
girls-
what a weapon.
She caught her a foot short. It was an unbelievable finish, and I just think like everyone's head almost exploded instantaneously. It was pretty crazy. But
And that was it. That's a good sporting moment.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, get around that. Go watch it again. It was pretty cool.
Check that out.
We will have to check it out. Angus and I will talk about our sport highlights in the monthly wrap-up, which we're going to speak about and lock that in because we can't be tardy with that anymore. But the new scripted question is we're going to have another scripted question soon. The Celine Dion challenge. No, the Cher challenge.
Cher.
If I could turn back time, what would
is
you
that
do?
the question?
That's the question. We need a soundboard.
Can I have
so
a
we
cop
go.
out? Can I have a cop out answer and just say I wouldn't change anything, mate? Like,
No. It doesn't have to be S&C related. It can just be life. Like you wish.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like every little stuff up along the way.
Oh, you're a
adds-
big
Please
butterfly
the same.
effect
God
guy, aren't
damn.
you? Everyone
Well,
is always
Just
like
say
this
you
butterfly
wish you
effect.
threw more money on Bitcoin.
One thing you could change in a vacuum.
Yeah, I got in on Bitcoin too late.
And now he has to work as an SSC.
yeah. Fucking Bitcoin. Hey, is there anything serious, or you reckon that's it?
That's it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I should
that's
have got
it.
on Bitcoin 3 years earlier. Than I
Or
did.
putting a hundo on Leicester City to win the Premier League whenever they did. In
Yeah, I mean, if you put a
2014.
hundo on Bitcoin 3 years before,
Probably
you
pays
probably
you a
would
bit
have
more
paid
than
off a bit
that.
better than
Fucking
Leicester
oath,
City.
it would.
But I guess then having the winning betting slip, that's also cool.
Yeah.
For your core score.
Yeah, post it straight online before you've cashed it, realizing someone just cashed it using their phone and the barcode. Imagine that. There you go, Nathan, Kiely. What an episode! You'll be back for round 3.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Really,
Just
really
quickly,
Any
appreciate it.
last words, Angus?
I'm just curious, what do you think between you and Graham Morris, who's yet to make his debut on the show for 2019, as far as a slug out for guest of the year?
Oh, I'm sure Gmo's got me covered. He's
You got some votes last year.
No.
Fucking votes.
G's probably a little less reserved. You probably get away with telling you what he wants.
He
Yeah.
Every now and then he goes into his shell.
And he bears a little bitch.
Yeah, you
About
got to get
not calling
two
people
beers,
out.
Gmo.
I think-
is the
I think-
optimal for a good podcast.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he knows that he's about to go somewhere that he shouldn't, so he,
He
stops
pulls himself back.
Yeah.
Anyway, he'll be back on. All right, guys, there you have it. Make sure you... Oh, what's your Nathan... What's your Instagram again?
Yeah,
Go
just,
check that
just
out.
Nathan Kiely _ I think I changed it.
Yeah.
So
Nothing performance
Kiely
related?
is Kiely.
Yeah,
Everyone
nice.
get that wrong.
Yeah, fuck me
Yeah,
included.
Nathan Kiely _ That's it.
Done. Angus, anything else to
No, it was
finish
good
it off?
times.
That was a good app. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed, and see you next time.